Good morning, Chair Haas and members of the committee. My name is Lisa Lyon, for the record. I want to just introduce the other members of the team. Jen Capalanga is a parent and an educator. Moira Finnegan is a speech-language pathologist. And Alicia Roberts-Franks is a professor of special ed at Lewis and Clark. Also in attendance is Emery Roberts, the youngest member of our team. She's a high school student right here from Lincoln High School. She has submitted a letter which you will be receiving. She is also the founder of the Dyslexia Student Union at Lincoln High School. My son Theo attends 5th grade at a Portland public school. We are a fortunate family. A private psychologist identified my son with dyslexia in 2nd grade and recommended he receive private tutoring 3 times a week. So that is what we have done. Unfortunately, many students with the same learning profile as my son are not getting the recommended evidence-based instruction that they need to learn to read. I am here on behalf of Decoding Dyslexia Oregon. We are a group of parents and educators concerned by the lack of evidence-based instruction for children with dyslexia and related language-based learning differences in the public schools. We are advocating for improved teacher training and delivery of evidence-based instruction for general education as well as for special education teachers. Decoding Dyslexia Oregon is part of a national movement, one of 47 chapters throughout the U.S. Parents and educators have rapidly bonded over social media, and our stories are more similar than different. We are keenly aware of progress being made in other states, and we are inspired by changes happening across the country. New laws, pilot programs, comprehensive teacher training programs, and successful classroom instruction. Decoding Dyslexia holds monthly meetings for parents and educators. At our first meeting of the year last week, 80 people attended. One couple drove 211 miles from Pendleton, Oregon. While this type of interest in our program fuels us, it also makes us question why are neither the state nor the schools providing quality information for which its citizens are clamoring. To meet Oregon's goal of having all children reading at grade level by the end of 3rd grade, we believe it is essential to provide appropriate teacher training and explicit instruction for the 15 to 20% of students with this neurological brain difference. We challenge the state to offer meaningful professional development and services and to improve standards for incoming teachers. The good news is there are plenty of programs that provide results for struggling readers. They're explicit, direct instruction, multisensory, and systematic. The even better news is these programs work for English language learners as well. The bad news is Oregon's teachers, through no fault of their own, are ill-prepared to instruct children with this learning difference. Currently, you cannot take a course in dyslexia in the state of Oregon. Even teachers who have earned their master's degrees in reading or in special education are not educated about dyslexia. Ask any teacher you know what he or she knows about dyslexia, and their response will be informative. Oregon's teachers need more tools in their toolbox. Despite the failures of the past, I am hopeful as I come before you today on behalf of a grandmother who is struggling to find services for her grandson. She shared that her father never learned to read and that she fought with the school system to provide appropriate instruction for her son 25 years ago. She never dreamt the public schools would fail 3 generations of her family. There is a strong genetic component to dyslexia that I believe has prevented many illiterate parents from successfully advocating for their children. The last place to which an illiterate person wants to return is the principal's office. October is Dyslexia Awareness Month, and Decoding Dyslexia would like to work with the Senate by providing a Dyslexia 101 training or dyslexia simulation to begin increasing awareness of this invisible and frequently misunderstood learning difference. I know that addressing these fundamental issues would be a win-win for legislators, principals, teachers, families, and students like my son. When these issues are addressed, then everyone will win. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Haas, members of the committee. My name is Jennifer Capalanga, and I am from Portland. I hope to shed light on a little-known and hidden educational equity issue in our state. I'll do so by sharing the story of my son, Garrett. The beginning of Garrett's story is the same as thousands of children in Oregon's public schools. Garrett was distressed in 1st grade when, despite his tremendous effort, he was not learning to read. I, as his mother, practiced with him, but he struggled. I'm also a trained special education teacher with a master's in education, so I used all of my training to help him. But he continued to make minimal progress. There began to be talk among the teachers at his school that the standards were too high for children like Garrett. I was terrified for my son. The part where Garrett's story begins to differ for thousands of children in Oregon is when at age 7, he was diagnosed by a private educational psychologist as moderately dyslexic. Garrett's educational psychologist recommended that the best practice for someone with dyslexia was Orton Gillingham tutoring. Since Garrett's public school did not offer this type of evidence-based instruction, we resorted to private tutoring for Garrett. Garrett has received tutoring twice a week for 2 years. Because this type of instruction matches his neuroanatomy, he has thrived. Today, he has learned the tools he needs to succeed in the classroom. He is happy and confident and has even exceeded the standards in both reading and math on the Oaks exams. I come before you to say that not providing these evidence-based instruction to Oregon students is an equity issue. Many parents who have concerns about the current state of education for dyslexic children in Oregon do not have the luxury of speaking before you today, nor the ability to pay $5,000 to $8,000 a year for private tutoring when instruction is not provided in the schools. As a teacher, I couldn't understand why so many of my bright, capable students with learning disabilities were so unengaged in their education, as evidenced by their poor attendance and poor assignment completion rates. Today, as a parent, having seen all that students with dyslexia endure, I am surprised that they continue to attend school at all. I want you to know that the story of Oregon students with dyslexia is not hopeless. There are scientifically proven methodology to provide our children with the free and appropriate education that they are entitled to. These methods can be taught in cost-effective ways to all students. On behalf of Oregon's children, I implore you to seriously examine this issue, to consult with qualified experts, and formulate a plan which will bring these methods to Oregon schools. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today.
Good morning, Chair Haas and members of the committee. My name is Moira Finnegan, and I'm a speech-language pathologist with Portland Public Schools. I'd like to tell you a story of how I became passionate about addressing the needs of students with dyslexia. My first year on the job, I had a 5th grade student who transferred to my school from a special school for children with the most challenging behavior problems. At my first meeting with him, this student said to me, "Can I tell you a secret?" And I said, "Nope, I just met you. You can tell me your secret next time." It turns out his secret was, I can't read. He was a 5th grader, but he was reading and writing at the kindergarten level. He had behavior issues, which may well have developed as a way to divert attention from the fact that he couldn't read. But he had shown the courage to tell his secret in the hopes that someone would finally teach him how to read. I was shocked and perplexed as to how this student had made it all the way from kindergarten to 5th grade, and yet no one had ever taught him how to read. I said to this student, "This is your lucky year. I'm going to teach you how to read." But I quickly realized I was in way over my head. This student could read simple words like top, but when I added an S to create the word stop, he was completely confused and could not read it. When I worked with this student, my stomach would be in knots because I knew I didn't have the skills to help him. I could not understand why he seemed unable to learn how to read, but I had a suspicion that he may have dyslexia. I sought out specialized training on dyslexia, and my suspicions were confirmed. This student was suffering from severe dyslexia that had remained undiagnosed and untreated all these years. How was it possible that not a single educator among all those who had worked with this student over the years had missed the clear signs of dyslexia? I came to realize that there is a gaping hole in knowledge and services within our school system regarding dyslexia, and thousands of kids like this student are suffering because of it. This lack of knowledge is by no means unique to Portland Public Schools. Indeed, this gap in knowledge exists in school districts throughout Oregon and across the country. Educators need to know what works for students with dyslexia. Children with dyslexia respond best to sequenced, systematic, and explicit reading instruction that involves several senses, hearing, seeing, and touch, at the same time. When given this type of instruction, students with dyslexia can learn to read. I only wish I had had the opportunity to use this teaching method with my student. Unfortunately, he moved to another state, so I never got the chance to try these methods with him. According to the American Academy of Pediatrics, children identified as reading disabled after 2nd grade rarely catch up to their peers. We know that 3rd grade students who are not reading at grade level are 4 times less likely to earn a high school diploma. For students living in poverty, reading below grade level in 3rd grade makes them 12 times less likely to graduate from high school. So we have to reach these kids by 1st grade in order to give them the best chance of graduating from high school, which will in turn give them the best chances of succeeding in life. I want to say in the strongest possible terms that dyslexia is an equity issue. Parents of the students I work with in North Portland will never be able to afford the private evaluations or tutoring that Jen and Lisa were able to provide for their children. Many families trust that the public school system will do right by their children, that educators have the necessary knowledge and skills to teach all children how to read. In reality, we educators are not given the tools we need in our teacher preparation programs to recognize and treat dyslexia in our students. The unfortunate result is thousands of students like my 5th grader who could not read and perhaps never will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Haas and members of the committee. My name is Alicia Roberts-Frank, and I am the Special Education Director and in the Teacher Education Department at Lewis and Clark College, where I also teach future elementary and secondary teachers. I joined Decoding Dyslexia because every child deserves to learn to read. Every child deserves a free public education, which many students with dyslexia are not receiving. I began my teaching career in California at a private elementary school for children with dyslexia, where I was trained in Slingerland, a classroom adaptation of the Orton-Gillingham approach, both of which are evidence-based approaches to teaching students with dyslexia. The training I went through opened my eyes to the many ways students can struggle when learning to read, as well as the efficacy of using a multisensory approach for building neurological connections. It's one thing to read about the changes that can happen in the brain as a result of instruction, but another to see a child make a cognitive connection as a result of a physical action. That knowledge base that I gained helped me recognize students who were misidentified for special education and those whose educational programs were inappropriate. And it enabled me to reach all learners and help them unlock print. Since becoming a teacher trainer, I have encountered numerous educators like Moira and Jen, teachers who, because they care deeply about their students' success, are desperately seeking for increased knowledge and skills so that they can reach their struggling learners. I joined Decoding Dyslexia because I have seen firsthand the struggles, frustration, and pain individuals with dyslexia can experience when they are not taught decoding strategies, as well as the pride and joy they experience when they discover that they can read, they can unlock meaning from print. I have seen numerous teachers and teacher candidates relieved, as I was, to learn that our language isn't a mystery, that the connection between speech and print really does make sense. Research has shown that approximately 60% of children learning to read find learning to read a challenge, and that for at least 20 to 30% of them, learning to read is one of the most difficult tasks they will ever undertake. Many of these children have dyslexia, yet none of the standards for training teachers in Oregon include the ability to recognize dyslexia or teach explicit decoding skills. The consequences of not adequately educating students with dyslexia are incredibly costly. The high incarceration rates of illiterate individuals, the cost of remedial programs, and the loss in human capital are just a few examples of how this educational oversight damages Oregon's economy. We also know that without addressing the educational needs of students with dyslexia, Oregon will not come close to meeting the governor's 40-40-20 goals. We strongly urge you to invest in preventative care for Oregon students. Our proposal is to craft legislation that ensures training for all of Oregon's teachers on indicators of dyslexia and evidence-based teaching techniques for students with dyslexia. Dyslexia screening for all students in Oregon, and early intervention for all students with dyslexia. Our hope is that we can begin the teacher training piece in the upcoming legislative session by simply requiring that each school district address the characteristics of students with dyslexia and their academic and emotional needs as part of professional development. We know that this investment will have huge rewards for Oregon's students, families, teachers, and economy. Thank you for your time today, and we are happy to answer any questions.